Good morning and welcome to Athlone on this beautiful morning. Welcome to the God's Roll Call Devotionals, of which this is number 13, and we're thinking about Moses again. The faith that brings about the impossible. You know, for a man who had once been powerful in speech and actions, according to Acts 7, verse 22, times had certainly changed for Moses. He was a broken and humbled man by all that had happened to him since he fled from Egypt, having slain the Egyptian. Exodus 2, verse 15. So much so that he now declared himself to be slow of speech and tongue. Exodus 4, verse 10. And a man who spoke with faltering lips. Exodus 6. And yet, at 80 years of age, obeying God's command, he returned to Egypt and with Aaron began to confront Pharaoh with God's demand, "Let my people go." Exodus 5, verse 1, and Exodus 7, verse 16, and so on. Let's take the time to read our verses for today from Hebrews 11, verse 27 to 29. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land. But when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. Verse 27. How Moses left. Consider all those years that he spent learning the wisdom of the Egyptians. And then consider the next for 40 years he spent unlearning it all by being a shepherd. And so was at last prepared for the task of leading God's people up out of Egypt. Moses was now set to go. Fear of Pharaoh didn't hinder himself or Aaron from declaring God's demand, "Let my people go." But over the next year or so, they suddenly had a hard time from first their own people, but then the process of the 9 plagues, and finally the duplicity of Pharaoh, ending with his threat to kill them both. Exodus chapter 10, verse 28. Imagine the mental strain on both men. There are times when all that faith can do is endure and persevere and stand and wait on God to intervene. Roy Gingrich says that Moses, with an eye of faith, saw an invisible monarch in heaven, far greater than the little monarch on earth who threatened him. Again, we see a faith with confidence in things hoped for and with conviction concerning things unseen. Is this not the greatest demonstration of faith? To be rebuffed time and time again, to be threatened with death, and yet with unshakable confidence to look to him who is invisible. Consider verse 28. What Moses began. Despite the circumstances that surrounded God's people, their deliverance was now close at hand. Detailed instructions were being put in place for the 10th and final plague, the death of the firstborn. And so appropriate protection measures also had to be communicated by Moses. Exodus chapter 12, verse 21 to 28. It was Moses, again used by God for the institution of these instructions as a lasting ordinance for the people then, and as an ongoing witness for the generations to come. Consider what that first Passover night must have been like as Moses' instructions from God were put into place. The lamb that had to be slain, the hyssop that had to be used, the blood that had to be applied to the lintel and doorposts, the meat that had to be roasted, and that the people had to be ready to leave. All of these things foretelling the great deliverance that Jesus would bring about in times to come for those who would put their faith in him. See too how this month Abib, renamed Nisan after the exile, now becomes the first month of the year. What a way to emphasize the new year with the death of the Passover lamb, alongside the budding of new life in the onset of the spring season. Think about verse 29. Consider again whose faith is on display here. Is it the faith of the people? No. You can hear their fear when they realize that they're trapped. In Exodus chapter 14, verses 10 to 12. Pharaoh is drawing closer from behind them. The desert is hemming them in, and the Red Sea obstructs their progress. And what does Hebrews 11, verse 1 state? Faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. These people clearly didn't have Moses' kind of faith. And sadly, they would never actually acquire it. Psalm 95, verses 8 to 11. In Exodus 14, verses 13 to 14, though, it's Moses' faith that encourages the people. It's his faith that expresses his confidence in the God that he serves. It's his faith that declares their complete dependence, and their complete deliverance at the Lord's hand. It's his faith that assures them that God will fight for them. And finally, it's his faith that announces all they have to do is watch as the Lord brings all of this about. Dr. Warren Wiersbe quotes Vance Havantner as saying, Moses chose the imperishable, saw the invisible, and did the impossible. And then goes on to say himself, Moses' faith enabled him to face Pharaoh unafraid and to trust God to deal with his foe. The endurance of Moses was not a natural gift, for by nature Moses was hesitant and retiring. This endurance and courage came as the reward of his faith. So as we close our time together today, let's chew on three things throughout our day. How long might it take God to make us his ready servants who do his bidding with the right kind of faith? Remember that God always rewards faith. Didn't Jesus say, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, then we could do incredible things also? And finally, never underestimate what a mighty work God can do through one person's childlike faith. May you have a truly blessed day today, brothers and sisters, as you look to our God, remembering that he is able to do immeasurably more than all we can ask or imagine. Amen. Amen.